Hello, welcome to the April 4th Coalition Show. My name is Richard Desati. This is the show we're recording on January 30th, 2023. I'm sorry that Elizabeth Manns is feeling a little bit under the weather, so you're stuck with me doing this show by myself, but I'll do my best to fill in for Liz. The April 4th Coalition's mission statement is we are for workers' rights and collective bargaining rights, and we are against tax breaks for the rich and corporations who ship our jobs overseas. We've been doing this show, it's been about 9 years since almost 9 years since the closing of North Adams Regional Hospital. I don't know, Liz knows the number of shows we've done since that closing, but just 9 years, it's coming on in March, will be 9 years. But we support all the articles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, but as is our custom during our show, we read Article 23 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Article 23, Section 1, everyone has the right to work, to free choice of employment, to just and favorable conditions of work, and protection against unemployment. Number 2, everyone, without any discrimination, has the right to equal pay for equal work. Number 3, everyone who works has the right to just and favorable remuneration, ensuring for himself or herself and his family or her family an existence worthy of human dignity and supplemented, if necessary, by other means of social protection. Number 4, everyone has the right to form and join trade unions for the protection of his or her interests. So today, I thought we'd talk a little bit about the secrecy that's been going on in our government. There's been a case against Hillary Clinton when they said that she violated some of the Government Secrets Acts by putting some of her information on a private server for her emails. And then, of course, Donald Trump's made a lot of headlines with taking secret classified documents. And then it's been found that Joe Biden had some in his office and in his garage at his home, and also Mike Pence. And it's all becoming like a moral equivalency. You know, people are trying to draw that. But the question is, you know, what's this? Why do we have so many secret documents? Like, why are people prosecuted for releasing some of this information, say in the press? Chelsea Manning was put in jail. Julian Assange is awaiting extradition to the United States, is going to be tried. I mean, is he for publishing secrets? Now, according to our Constitution, you know, the First Amendment says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or the press, or the right to people to peacefully assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. Now, I've done a lot of grievances as my job as a union steward over the years, and one of the most important parts of a grievance procedure is finding out what the facts are. If you don't have the facts, if you can't get the agreed upon facts, you can never really solve a problem. And if we go back even further to the Declaration of Independence, it says, when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for a people to dissolve political bands which have connected them with another, to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitles them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to separate. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. The consent of the governed. If there are so many secrets, how can we really give our consent? Well, today, I just want to show some segments of a podcast by Jon Stewart. He has a guest on, a historian. The title of the podcast is Our Classified Document System is Redacted, the Problem with Jon Stewart's Podcast. The media is chasing the classified documents fiasco like it's spy versus spy, Trump versus Biden. But on this week's episode, he's going to break it down, the absurdity of our national security system that makes it so darn easy to hoard classified documents. We're going to have on Matthew Connelly. He's a professor of history at Columbia University, and he's the author of a book that will be available on February 14th of this year. It's called The Declassification Engine, What History Reveals About America's Top Secrets. So we're going to watch about 22 minutes of this 48-minute interview, and we'll stop after about 11 minutes and we'll talk a little bit more about this, and then we'll do some more. And I would urge you to go to YouTube and find this podcast, or go to your podcast and listen to it. But this one is well worth listening to. So please, let's listen to Jon Stewart and his guest.
Okay, we are talking to our guest, Matthew Connelly. He's a professor of international and global history, which feels redundant to me, but this is Columbia University, and they know what they're doing, for God's sakes. He is the author of, it's called The Declassification Engine, What History Reveals About America's Top Secrets, and it may be the most presciently timed book ever written. Matthew Connelly, welcome to The Problem.
Good to be here, John.
How long were you working on this book about America's classification system?
I've been working on the book for about 7 years, but the research goes back a decade. I started out all the way back in 2013. But even before then, for decades, I've been working on declassified documents and kind of driving myself crazy with them.
Now, when the Donald Trump case about classified documents came up, and then obviously the Biden case about classified documents came up, how often did you walk around your apartment shouting "ka-ching" and just doing this and just making it rain around Columbia University and generally Morningside Heights specifically?
Yeah, well, I don't normally thank former President Trump, but he really did me a solid in this case. Now, having said that, we've had scandals, maybe not of this magnitude, but for sure, if you think about, whether it was the Republican National Committee email or, the IRS not being able to find their email. Those are cases where, either they were producing lots of information they didn't want anybody else to look at, or, when somebody wanted to look at it, they somehow found that it couldn't be found. And so, the most famous, maybe even before the whole Trump affair, was Hillary Clinton and her email. So we've seen a lot of these scandals, and it's just, if anything, it's just accelerating.
Now, in terms of scandal, and I'll take everybody's word for it that these are scandals rather than just interesting narratives for the media to focus on or hyper focus on, and watching them draw distinctions between Trump and Biden, and watching them explain why this is the most important thing that's happened to the country. The thing I can't figure out is the Barack Obama administration, they prosecuted more people under the Espionage Act than anybody in history, maybe even cumulatively. Edward Snowden had to flee to Russia. What is the difference? I don't understand what keeping a classified document in your Corvette, or in your, let's say, walled fortress of a country club, why are we even wringing our hands about this?
Well, I mean, for sure, I think there's special treatment, right? And there has been for a long time.
Right.
If you look, for instance, let's take the example of when people write their memoirs, right? And when they're really important people, maybe they were senior officials, they had access to lots of secrets. So what do? They go out and they talk to their agent, they talk to their publishers, and they drum up big advances because they're telling us, that they're going to tell all, right? They're going to tell us things we didn't know before.
Secrets.
Because these were secrets, right? Because otherwise, like, is it their writing talent? Usually not.
Oh, I don't know if you've read Mike Pompeo's book. It is.
I've not yet had the pleasure.
I don't want to say Tolstoy-esque.
Yeah, but just think of it. There are lots of people. There's 1.3 million people in America now have a top secret security clearance.
Oh, wait, how many?
1.3 million a top secret security clearance.
Tops can see anything.
Well, anything that's classified top secret where they are determined to have a need to know.
Let's walk back.
Yeah.
What are America's classification categories?
Okay, so I'll give you the rundown.
Right.
So there's top secret, right?
Okay.
And
That is the top.
it's the top of the top secret.
It's got the word top in it.
There are people who say that, this was, sensitive compartmentalized information. That means it was even more top secret than top secret. And this is just an example of this whole culture of secrecy. These people really get into this stuff, telling you about all the gradations and, the special access programs.
Yes.
But, the way to think of it, to be simple, to the extent that's possible with something as complicated as this, is that it's a little bit like a matrix, right? So there are levels of secrecy, right? There's top secret, there's secret,
Yes.
there's confidential, there's controlled unclassified information. So there's these different levels, but then there are also these silos, right? So there are all these different programs, many of them special access programs where you have to be read in. You have to have what they call a need to know to have access to the secrets that are in that silo.
And apparently just telling people that we have those programs can get you sent to Russia or can make you live in an embassy somewhere in,
Yeah,
I mean, it's wild.
If you're one of those people, who's been read in and you had access to that information, and then you go out and you tell somebody, we have this program, and you tell them what it is, then for sure you can be prosecuted under the Espionage Act. So what's been happening, like you said, is in recent years, more and more people are getting prosecuted under the Espionage Act. And you're absolutely right. Under Barack Obama, there were more prosecutions under the Espionage Act than in all previous administrations combined.
Combined?
Yes.
Oh, so I thought I made that up, but
No, it's true.
Now I feel. Now, I mean, you have Chelsea Manning was sentenced to 30 some years under the Espionage Act for passing things to WikiLeaks.
And now Assange himself is under threat of prosecution. And if you believe that he's a journalist, and many people do,
Right.
he is the first journalist now to be threatened with prosecution under the Espionage Act. So not just the sources.
But I thought that the Obama administration also threatened journalists with prosecution.
You're right. There were threats, but it's
But
the
they didn't
following
go through with it.
Yes.
And most of the things that we learn from all this are things we already know. They are not particularly exposing of state secrets. So is it merely the act of showing it to somebody or having it in your possession?
Well, when you read in the law, there's language like, to, further the interests of a foreign power, right? And that can be important. So, like, let's say if somebody accidentally disclosed something, or they, in the case, many people think with President Biden, they think he mishandled classified information. So that's a different matter. And typically it's a much less serious offense.
So mishandling would be considered a misdemeanor in the world of classification. Passing that so that the public finds out this information, whether a whistleblower or otherwise, that's considered the felony.
Well, this is the time I say that I am not a lawyer. So you don't want to get your legal advice from me.
I have an honorary doctorate, so I'm just going to say that I'm correct.
Yeah, but working in this space, I have had the experience, of reading legal briefs, about what it is you can get prosecuted for. So for an example, when I first started out, I mentioned how it was about 10 years ago, I got together with some colleagues in the statistics department and computer science, and we had this idea, hey, there's all this secrecy, and there are millions now, millions of declassified documents, and who knows how many still classified, billions, probably. And we thought, why don't we begin using like these data science tools to get to the bottom of this? Like, let's start figuring out like what is an actual top secret, and what is really something that's already in the public domains. People, things that people should already know. And what we found is that there are lawyers out there, former government lawyers. One of them was the general counsel at the NSA. Another one was the head of major crimes at the Southern District. These lawyers told us that we could get prosecuted under the Espionage Act just for analyzing declassified documents. So it's not just
Wait, what?
Yes, I kid you not.
How in God's name you can be prosecuted for espionage by analyzing declassified information?
That's the theory.
That doesn't make any sense.
If you go to a very fancy law school,
It's got to be a fancy one.
it has to be fancy, and you get paid $1,000 an hour, you can come up with all kinds of theories, right?
And these are the same institutions that are hoovering up every piece of information that you have in your life. In other words, after the Patriot Act, Americans have no privacy. There is nothing classified in terms of information for Americans. The government is welcome to suck it up into giant tubes and wherever it is that they store it, in windowless buildings in the Nevada desert. But if you even read the things that they've declassified, they will fuck you up.
Yeah, I mean, in this case, the argument was that we were using new technology, which is true, and we had access to vastly more data than anyone did before, and that's true too. But their argument was that that quantitative change, as great as it is, brings a qualitative difference. But at the end of the day, they even agreed, that really it would be an overzealous, maybe overambitious prosecutor who would try to bring such a case. Because luckily in America, we have this thing called the First Amendment. And luckily
I haven't read up on this yet, so you're going to have to.
It's the first one, John. Come on, you don't have to just read. Yeah. All right. So anyway,
I'm actually getting through the preamble right now, so that's this year's.
Yeah, it goes on, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, so there's also legal precedent that academics, and luckily I am one, journalists too, we're allowed to seek out the truth. And we're even allowed to take certain chances, take risks in trying to discover things, create new knowledge. And so luckily the Supreme Court a long time ago agreed that you have to let academics do this because, if you're not even going to let professors.
Yeah, this is pretty amazing. I'm just going to briefly just comment on that point that Jon Stewart made. The government is, in industry, is invading our privacy. We have no privacy, really. All the information becomes available to them, but the government can classify their secrets, protect themselves. So there's a little bit of, it's not fair. It's just not fair that, the individual rights are being trampled upon, and the state is hiding mostly their mistakes, as Jon Stewart will point out. So let's watch a little bit more of this, and I encourage you to go onto YouTube and watch the whole thing again because it's very, very informative.
Why did Reality Winner go to jail? All she did was she told us about a program that the Russians had. It wasn't even an American program. It was that the Russians were interfering with our elections.
Right. Well, in her case, the sad thing is that when she signed up to work in that position and have access to government documents, secret documents, she had to pledge to protect that information. And it's part of the whole culture, right? Is when you're inducted into this world, this secret world.
Yes, this secret, cloistered world of 1.4 million Americans, this vast. It's like, not to get to The Last of Us, but it's like the mycelium, the threads of the espionage and declassification and classification world that are this is a vast network of vascularity.
Right. And, when you think of it, it sounds implausible, right? And there are millions more, by the way, millions more who have other levels of security clearance, whether it's for secret or confidential. There are more people who have security clearances, even at the top secret level, than live in the District of Columbia.
Who decides? Who decides that something is top secret? How much clearance is that? The grand poobah of clearances that then can look. Who decides?
All right. You ready to go into this strange world with me?
Oh,
okay.
Matthew Connolly, you bring it, baby.
All right. So, John, let's say that you would like a job, in the Biden administration, right? And you might even want to work, in the Pentagon, say. Why not, right? So what you have to find out is if you're going to be able to get your security clearance. So first, they have to want you for the job, and then you have to go through this long ordeal. You have to fill out a form. Last I checked, I think it's 138 pages long. You have to fill
A
out
security clearance form is 138 pages long.
Yeah,
right.
and your friends and family are going to get interviewed by the FBI typically. You're going to have to do a long face-to-face interview, talk about all of your gambling, John, all of your substance abuse issues, everything
Jesus.
that could potentially.
Good thing I don't want to work there.
I know, right? Me neither.
Oh boy, Jesus. Yeah.
But yes, they're trying to find all these ways in which you could potentially, be vulnerable to blackmail. But it has the effect at the same time. Like, I don't know if you've ever belonged, to any kind of, you wouldn't tell me, right? But any kind of secret society or fraternity.
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
No,
they also have these
I'm
rituals.
in a ton of those.
Right?
Sure.
Many, too many. But
Yeah.
they have their rituals, right? And one of the first things they want is for you to give up your secrets. Right. So it has this effect of like making people feel like
Isn't that how Scientology works? I think that's kind of the whole game. So they want to know everything about you. I mean, in the old days, look, people that were gay weren't allowed to have security clearance. Obviously it was a ridiculous bar of entry for that. But what makes them think that using drugs ever makes you vulnerable to blackmail or you're a security risk?
Well, this is an example of how it reflects a certain kind of culture. When you think of it, this whole system was created in the 1940s and 50s, right? And so the people in charge of the system, they had a certain sense of what does a loyal American look like? What do they talk like? And surprise, surprise, but it turns out that, people who were alcoholics, back in the day, people used to call them womanizers, like people would have serial affairs and so on. These people didn't seem to have problems.
It was all fine.
Yeah.
Was this based on communism? Was this whole idea based on sort of anarchists and communists and trying to weed out the reds in our government or the undesirables?
The way it worked, it was especially difficult for people who were, say, second-generation immigrants. Right. Now, that's not to say that plenty of second-generation immigrants didn't get security clearances. Like J. Robert Oppenheimer is a famous example.
Well, sure.
But he went. He went to the right schools.
Yes. And he was making the right thing.
Right.
So.
He was making the top. And you needed guys like that, right?
That's right.
But
so they would have meetings and be like, this guy's Irish. I don't know I don't know if we can trust this Irish fella.
They put all the Irishmen in the FBI.
Interesting. Who designed this classification and clearance regime? Is it designed by Hoover? Was it designed by who made it?
Yeah, so there were a lot of cooks in the kitchen.
Okay.
But in terms of like the whole system and how it first got worked out, in terms of levels of clearance and also like the silos of information and the way you had to get these FBI interviews and clearance checks and the rest of it, all that started with the Manhattan Project.
Oh, wow.
And so the Manhattan Project was like the prototype, and then that system propagated itself until eventually it took over much of our government. Let me just tell you one other thing about Oppenheimer, though. So just recently, the Department of Energy, a little late, but they decided that they're going to void the revocation of J. Robert Oppenheimer's security clearance. Because many years ago, I think it was 1954, Oppenheimer fell out of step with the rest of the national security establishment. He didn't want to build hydrogen bombs. Right? He thought that the U.S. had to share nuclear technology in order to prevent nuclear war. And so they found ways to drive him out. And the way they did it was by stripping him of his security clearance. Now, the interesting thing
Wow.
is that, they pointed out how he had relatives, who were communists in some cases. In other cases, they just were civil libertarians. But,
Mhm.
one of the people they put on the three-man, and they're all men, of course, one of the men they put on this three-panel jury.
Well, you know why? The ladies gab.
No.
I don't know if you knew that. Back in the 40s and 50s, the
Yeah.
ladies would gab.
Oh, don't get me started, John.
Oh,
But
yeah.
But one of the three, he said, in my experience, security risks tend to be Jews, right? Before I know anything about them, I know they're likely to be Jewish.
Wow.
Yes, and that's why they picked him. They put that guy on the jury so that he could judge Oppenheimer.
A three-person jury who decided, well,
Yeah.
that guy is Jewish, and they were like, he's Jewish enough that he can design the bomb, but he's a little too Jewish,
Right.
to keep going.
So this is how we end up with this national security establishment where, don't believe what you see on TV, okay? Like if you watch TV, you think, oh my God, all the leaders of the CIA are African American, right? And they have all these interests. You're like, you don't know. Sadly, I'm sorry to tell you, but
What?
yeah, systematically for decades, it's been particularly difficult for people who are not white, straight men to get security clearances.
And here's the crazy part. Weren't there people in the Trump administration who failed their security clearance test, and then ultimately the administration was like, fuck it.
Yeah.
It's fine. He can go to the meeting.
Well, it's an example of how, this is one true thing that Trump said, is that a president is sovereign over secrecy. The president ultimately controls like how this information is defined, who gets access to it. And so if he decides like, well, my no good son-in-law, I don't care what you say about him, I'm still going to let him have access to top secrets.
Right.
At the end of the day, he's the one, if he doesn't like the way the regulations are written, he can rewrite them. All these executive orders are executive orders by the president.
So we have this enormous regime. We have a regime of secrecy. We have a regime of classification.
Mm-hmm.
It is millions of people deep. There are juries that decide what gets classified and what doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the top secret. And then, of course, there's the skiff. This stuff is so hot it's so juicy that you can only, if you take it with you, it is like the monkey's paw. It will curse you. You must only look at it in the skiff. But the truth is, this is an arbitrary administrative bureaucracy based on trying to keep the bomb out of Russia's hands.
And John, it's like the best kept secret in Washington.
Right.
There's this aura, right, around the whole national secrecy complex. Like we all know, it's so complicated, and they have to be so careful, and like they have to get clearances, and everything has to be stamped, it has to be inside envelopes and other envelopes, and it's true, there are all these rules and regulations, but the fact is that's not the way it actually works on the inside. What you find inside is a system out of control, right? They just can't agree among themselves on what secrets they actually have to protect. And as a result, a huge, amounts of information are protected at the highest level.
It's got to be at the highest level. Got to be
At the
skiff.
highest level.
They
Yeah.
probably decided in a skiff.
Yeah. And one of the reasons for that, it's basic human nature. And psychologists have studied this. If you take random pieces of paper and you stamp some of them secret, those are the pieces of paper that people think are important and valuable. So it's a very human need as well.
Let me give you a different human need that I have found in generally in administrative states and bureaucracies, and that is the need to cover your hiney. So how much of this is ass covering so that future administrations, when they come in, don't reveal what a bonehead you were when you made certain decisions about drones and wars and all kinds of other things that would embarrass you for your incompetence.
Yeah. So a lot of this stuff, it's just what you said. There's no incentive to declassify stuff. All the incentives are to mark things as secret or top secret, because otherwise people won't think that information is important. So your boss might not pay attention to it. Or like you said, like maybe you would have disclosed something that you weren't meant to. And the people who live in this world, they are lifers. Most of them, like they spend decades working inside this national secrecy complex.
Right.
And so sometimes they don't even know what's publicly known because pretty much everything they read is classified. So after a while, they don't actually know what the rest of the world knows. So even like senior CIA officials have commented on this kind of problem, and they call them innocents. They say there are all too many of these people in government, these people who don't actually know. The public already knows much of what they think is secret.
Wow. So I just can't say enough. I think you should finish watching this video when you get a chance. Thank you for viewing, and power to the people. Thank you.
There's power in the factory, power in the land, power in the hand of the worker. But it all amounts to nothing if together we don't stand. There is power in our union. Now the lessons of the past are all learned with workers' blood, with mistakes of the bosses we must pay for. From the cities and the farmlands to trenches full of